So on January 15th, we're gonna get our first MCU show that's handled by the people over at Marvel. This isn't gonna be Netflix, this isn't gonna be Agents of S.W.O.R.D, this is actual MCU content. The first show up is WandaVision. And in this show, we're gonna talk about what comics influenced the show, where we think the show is going, and any other surprises we think we might catch within. So much like all the other MCU properties, they do pull quite a bit from comics. It doesn't appear that a lot's gonna be mined from the comics for this series, but some things we have seen, it's kind of this idea of a suburban life with this family is very reminiscent of Tom King's Vision miniseries from a few years back. That miniseries saw Vision creating an entire artificial family for himself, a wife and 2 twin children. It's at a point in the comics where Vision and the Scarlet Witch have been separated since the events of House of M/Avengers Disassembled. Vision at this point in his life, he's created a family of robots or synthezoids very much like himself. So he took Scarlet Witch's brain patterns and imprinted those on artificial creation for a wife, and they created 2 children based on a mixing of those brain signals, his own brain signals and Scarlet Witch's own brain signals. It's crazy, but it's comics. You gotta kind of meet them halfway. Another thing we might see pulled from the comics is it looks like either Wanda is having a breakdown of some kind. We might be seeing that breakdown, which played out across Avengers Disassembled and continued into House of M, this idea of a person who can control reality losing control of her abilities and what that does to the reality around her. In the House of M storyline, we saw Scarlet Witch essentially reorder the Marvel Universe to suit everyone's needs. That reorganizing of reality, we're probably seeing that in the trailers for WandaVision on a much smaller scale. In the trailers, they show this kind of energy bubble that appears to be surrounding the neighborhood the show takes place in. So it appears as if she's either being manipulated or she's lost control of her abilities on a localized level, a suburban level. In the comics, House of M, she affects reality on a global scale and supplants humanity as the dominant species on the planet with mutants. Basically makes mutants the dominant species on the planet. They're kind of running the show with her father Magneto as kind of like the patriarch of the entire world order out of the nation of Genosha. One of the things we've heard a lot about the show is that it's going to delve into Wanda's origin a little bit and growing up in Sokovia and her love of American television, specifically older sitcoms. And if she is in some kind of distress, or if she's had some kind of breakdown, this might be her mind's way of kind of like putting together the world. It shows her and the Vision kind of advancing from the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s. The house changes around them. It goes from black and white into color. The clothing changes and updates. So we are kind of seeing like a progression through, and that might be her working through and realizing what's actually going on around her. This show's actually seeing a few characters returning. So obviously Wanda and Vision are the 2 main characters we're seeing again, but Jimmy Woo is a lesser known character in the MCU and in comics as well. In the comics, he's a totally different character. He's kind of like an Asian Nick Fury type character who runs around with a team called the Agents of Atlas. In the MCU, Jimmy Woo is an FBI agent who was seen last in Ant-Man and the Wasp. He was the FBI agent who was keeping an eye on Scott Lang while he was under house arrest. A very funny actor, a lot of comedy in that, so he'll probably bring a little bit of that to WandaVision, but he is reprising his character. The second character we're seeing Monica Rambeau. This character is recast, but only because the last time we saw Monica Rambeau was in Captain Marvel as a young child. She was the daughter of Carol Danvers' best friend. So we're seeing her daughter in that movie, now grown up as a young woman. Monica Rambeau, most notably, is the first female Captain Marvel in comics. This show may be laying the groundwork for her origin. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on in the show, but it appears that we are now seeing an adult version of Monica Rambeau. She appears to be an agent of S.W.O.R.D, which is going to be the MCU successor to S.H.I.E.L.D. S.H.I.E.L.D. was kind of dismantled and destroyed after Captain America and the Winter Soldier. S.W.O.R.D is the vessel that's going to take the place of that. We actually did see S.W.O.R.D introduced in the post-credit scenes of Spider-Man Far From Home. If Monica Rambeau appears to be an agent of S.W.O.R.D. Jimmy Woo might also be wrapped up in that organization now. So we are seeing S.W.O.R.D in this, and we will be seeing S.W.O.R.D down the line, as Marvel has revealed that a Secret Invasion show is in the works, starring Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury. So another character we've seen in the trailer repeatedly is a character called Agnes. A lot of people have pointed this out, that this is probably a reference to Agatha Harkness. In the comics, Agatha Harkness is a witch that spends a lot of time mentoring and training Wanda Maximoff in the control of her mutant abilities to warp reality. She's probably a lot more than she appears to be, and perhaps she's either the one trapping her here or trying to guide her out of this self-imposed reality she perhaps has created around herself. So one other thing I noticed in the trailer is they keep showing the shadowy beekeeper character. In the comics, there is a character or a group of characters that look very similar to beekeepers. It's kind of like an insult a lot of the characters call them. As an agent of AIM has a yellow uniform with what looks like a beekeeper helmet. We did see AIM introduced in Iron Man 3. I don't know that they're continuing that idea, but it is certainly a possibility that the beekeeper they've showed repeatedly in the trailers may be an agent of AIM, or maybe a hint or nod to the AIM comics costume that they typically don't do in these shows or the movies. So this show might also be introducing wider audiences to the idea of a multiverse. This was something teased very briefly in the second Spider-Man movie. Mysterio claimed to be from an alternate Earth. That might have been like a soft introduction to the idea of a multiverse in the MCU. With Wanda's ability to warp reality, that obviously opens up a lot of floodgates for a whole host of opportunities for what they can do in the show now. There's also been a lot of casting rumors coming out for the third Spider-Man movie. It's kind of hard to believe that this is all true, but if the rumors are to be believed, Alfred Molina's Dr. Octopus is coming back. Jamie Foxx's Electro is coming back. There's also talk that Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield are coming back to play their respective Spider-Mans. So it looks like the third Spider-Man movie may be this like live-action Spider-Verse. The second Doctor Strange movie is also called Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, so I would actually keep an eye out for an appearance by Doctor Strange in the WandaVision show. He played a large part in both Avengers Disassembled and House of M, and in the comics, Doctor Strange was the doctor who actually delivered the Scarlet Witch and Vision's children, which I think we're also probably, based on the trailers, going to see in the show. So in addition to what's coming with both Doctor Strange and Spider-Man that's going to spin out of WandaVision, is we're going to get two very significant members of the Young Avengers. In the original run, there were two different Young Avengers, Wiccan and Speed. Those children ended up being revealed to be the children of the Scarlet Witch and Vision. One of them having the powers of the Scarlet Witch, where it's like a more magic user. The other one having the powers of Scarlet Witch's brother, Pietro Quicksilver, who has speed powers. Those kids appear to be in the trailer and would be our next two Young Avengers being shown in the MCU. We technically have already seen one of the Young Avengers. Cassie Lang, Scott Lang's daughter, appeared in Avengers Endgame as a teenager. Due to the time jump in Avengers Endgame, she's obviously a lot older than she was the last time we saw her as a little girl. So she's technically a Young Avenger. In the comics, she becomes Stature, which is an awesome name for a superhero. Down the line, we know that Kate Bishop, kind of like a protege of Hawkeye, is appearing in the Hawkeye show. Kang the Conqueror has been confirmed for Ant-Man and the Wasp 2. Kang the Conqueror is also Iron Lad, who's another Young Avenger. There's also the possibility the Falcon and Winter Soldier show, that's the next Disney Plus show to premiere, could introduce us to Patriot, who is the grandson of the original Captain America. In the comic books, the super soldier serum that Captain America was given was first tested on an African American who also got the powers of Captain America, but then because it was the 1940s, they didn't want to have a black Captain America. Hulkling could appear in either the next Captain Marvel movie, as he's actually a Skrull, or possibly the Secret Invasion show coming down the line in a few years as well. So they are putting together the Young Avengers. We're also seeing Chavez, another Young Avenger, has been cast in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness coming out in a few years. So the groundwork for these characters has been laid. Recommended reading for these characters. For Vision, I would recommend Tom King's run. It was a great run focusing on the Vision entirely, what it means to be an artificial being, what an artificial being with a family would be like, and how the people in a suburb of Washington, D.C. would react to the new neighbors being essentially synthezoids. Tom King has a habit of kind of taking characters, much lesser known characters, and just doing these incredible stories. We saw this when he moved over to DC with his Mr. Miracle work, and now currently on Strange Adventures, where he's tackling both Adam Strange and Mr. Terrific. I'd also recommend Young Avengers. This was the initial Young Avengers book that they did do. Alan Heinberg and Jim Chung created the characters. For Scarlet Witch, I'd recommend James Robinson's 2015 run of Scarlet Witch. It was just an awesome book of, again, focusing specifically on this one character and her trying to delve into her own origins and figure out what happened with magic, her place in the world post House of M and Decimation, and kind of her working through like her origins and what her powers are and how they work. And what was really nice about this series in particular is almost every issue a different artist was drawing it. As she traveled the world, you got different artists from different parts of the world showing that visually through the types of art we saw throughout the series. So if you want to see more content like this, the best thing to do would be subscribe. I'm terrible at social media, so there's no guarantee I'll even remember to post the next video, let alone share it on all the different social media pages. If you want to follow me on Instagram, you can find me at The Brave Butter Pecan, and you can also hear me rant about comic books and movies and all other avenues of pop culture on a weekly podcast, Caffeinated Comics. You can find Caffeinated Comics wherever you find your podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, and Amazon Music.